Great. So today I'd like to talk to you about the state of DevOps and observability. I'm going to use data from DevOps Pulse. This is a yearly survey, essentially a questionnaire that we run that the people like you answer. On the last year, over 1,000 people answered the survey from various companies, from startups all the way to enterprises, from different countries, different industries. Unfortunately, on the gender diversity side, we still need to improve. 86% of those who answered were male, which is rather representative of the state in our industry. So here you go, the first stat of the survey. The survey covers many areas. I'd like to use the coming minutes to look into some common assumptions around cloud and cloud native, about what people use, what the issues are, what the solutions they use, and to check how these assumptions hold true in light of the results. In fact, I'd be more than curious. It's a bit annoying to have the virtual medium, so if you can make it a bit more interactive, I'll put the assumptions out there, and if you can on the chat even put a thumbs up if you think it's largely true, or a thumbs down, it'll be a bit more interactive and fun for all of us. So let's try this one. A word about myself. My name is Dotan Horovits. I'm a developer advocate at logs.io. We provide a SaaS platform for cloud-native observability, which is based on popular open source tools that you know, like Elasticsearch and Kibana and Prometheus and Jaeger and so on. I myself am an advocate of open source and communities. I co-organize a local chapter of the CNCF, the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. I organize a meetup. I have a podcast called Open Observability Talk. So if you're into podcast, do check it out. And generally, you can find me everywhere at Horovits. So if you find something interesting out of this and you tweet it, do tag me. And let's get straight to the assumptions as I promised you. And remember, thumbs up if you think it's true, thumbs down. Let's get going. Everybody is in AWS. What do you think? True? False? So AWS definitely still rules, not a surprise. 2/3 of the people who answered run on AWS. More interesting, actually, on the last survey is that Google Cloud is, in fact, catching up with Azure in the race for the second place. And still, we need to remember that both of them are far behind AWS. We're talking about 11, 12%. And the rest, as you can see here, are pretty much non-existent. So everybody's in AWS. Let's get right on to the next assumption. Everything is containerized. What do you think? True? False? So it's definitely happening. Over 50% said that more than half of their application are containerized. Even more impressive is that 30% said that over 3/4 of their apps are containerized. So for me, it was really, really impressive to see that. And remember, it's not just young startups that we responded. We're also talking about enterprises with over 1,000 employees. So it's definitely something that is happening across the board. So people are definitely going into containerized, which leads me to the next assumption. Kubernetes, a piece of cake. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Just give me a YAML and I'll manage your containers. What do you say? So, in fact, not really. People reported challenges across the board. The number one difficulty reported is about monitoring and troubleshooting. Over 44% said that. But people also reported issues with security and networking and cluster management and storage, you name it. So in short, maybe everyone's moving to containers, but they still don't know how to manage them, how to do this right, how to do this simple, production ready. And as I said, the number one challenge is with monitoring and troubleshooting, which leads me to the next assumption. Ready? Just use your metrics and logs, you fool. What's new here? We've been doing that for so long. What's the issue here? So 90% indeed use logging tools, 78% use metrics tools. Again, not surprising. What's interesting in this survey is the rise of distributed tracing that increased by 38% from the previous survey. The previous survey was 19%, now it's 26%. And that's without counting in the distributed tracing that comes bundled within APM solutions, which is a separate category here. Even more surprising, more impressive, is to see that among those who don't yet use distributed tracing, 64% indicated that are planning to start using it within the coming 1 or 2 years. So tracing definitely stands out as a central tool for monitoring, especially on the microservices and the cloud-native environment, the highly distributed environments, in addition to logs and metrics. Logs and metrics are not enough in these environments. And let's go on to the next assumption. Just one more start. From those who do use distributed tracing, the number one tool appears to be Jaeger. This is an open source tool, open source project under the CNCF with 32%. Then the second one is Zipkin, which is another open source. Open source definitely taking the lead here with distributed tracing. And let's go on to the next assumption. Serverless everywhere. Everyone is now moving to serverless. What do you think? Is that true? False? What do you think? So I was actually pretty amazed to see how much serverless has matured over the past year. In just 1 year, the adoption of serverless has grown by 33%, and now 75% use some sort of serverless. That's quite impressive. Not surprisingly, AWS Lambda is the top of line because, as we've seen, AWS is the primary vendor. But also Azure Functions and Google Cloud Functions are there. On the open source side, Kubeless is showing a very strong tendency. Over 11% already use Kubeless for serverless. So very interesting to see that. And the next one, networking, just use Service Mesh. What do you think? Just put the sidecar proxy and you're done. So not exactly. In fact, 62% still don't use any sort of service mesh. Of those who do use, we see Istio is the leading one at 20%. And again, an open source. So open source playing a key role here. Also following that is Consul, another open source. These are the leading solutions for serverless and still growing very nicely. 20% is definitely impressive for Istio. So I'd like to summarize the key takeaways that we've seen here. Everyone's moving their workloads to containers, starting to use Kubernetes. We saw that's happening, no question about that. But still experiencing many challenges operating Kubernetes in production across the board with many issues. The number one issue being monitoring and troubleshooting. And then we've seen distributed tracing is rising in popularity exactly for that, for monitoring and troubleshooting microservices and highly distributed environments alongside the augmenting the logs and metrics. And we've seen, as I said, serverless and service meshes, the newer emerging technologies with serverless picking up very nicely and service mesh still behind. But wait, what about security, open source? What about COVID-19 situation and edge computing and others? Then luckily you can find all the information in the full survey. You can see here the link, logs.io/DevOps-Pulse-2020. You can see past year's answers. And soon we'll be publishing the 2021 questionnaire. So if you are interested in taking part of that, do let me know. I'll also post a link that you can fill in a form. Be more than happy to have people there. And of course, you're welcome to share your feedback about the survey, about the presentation or anything else. You can reach out to me both here on the platform in the conference or at Horovits, Horovits. I'd be more than happy to touch base. I'm Dotan Horovits, and thank you very much for listening.